What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Tinted Visors podcast. Coming right back at you pretty quick here with episode 30. Today, we're just going to be doing a recap of the draft. We're going to be talking about some recent transactions, some trades. And then finally, we're going to look ahead to free agency, which starts tomorrow. Look at where some marquee free agents, where we think they're going to go and for how much they're going to go for. With that being said, let's get this thing going.
Before we get into the content, we're going to do card of the day. This time it's a little different. We've got a Steven Stamkos, Vinny Lecavalier, prestigious pairings, numbered to 100, dual auto out of SP Authentic. Really sweet card. I got a pretty good deal on it. Two Tampa Bay legends. It's kind of weird that, both of those guys, as well as even like Marty St. Louis, none of them have been able to close out their career with Tampa. It's not really looking like Stamkos is going to do it either. Just kind of unfortunate the way they treat their legends. But with that being said, it's a cool card. I'm going to keep collecting him.
Yeah, sweet card. It is pretty disappointing to see how Tampa Bay has kind of handled negotiations with Stamkos. That being said, my card today is a Canadian Juniors card. We're going to go with Peyton Krebs, 3-color patch auto. It's numbered 80 out of 199. Yeah, love these Canadian Junior cards. Not as expensive as the NHL cards, the upper deck ones. So picking up some Juniors cards of some players you like is always fun. And Krebs got the cage on. He is wearing the C in the picture. Just a sweet card. And yeah, just love the 3-color patch auto.
On into the content, just a couple buyouts that's happened recently. Adam Boqvist got bought out by Columbus. Nate Schmidt last year bought out by Winnipeg. Jack Campbell had that big contract bought out by Edmonton. Jeff Skinner as well. He had 3 more years left. And Cam Atkinson about a week ago. Just teams trying to get some cap relief going into free agency. And all those guys are now free to sign. I'm pretty sure all of them are going to get a contract. They're all still decent NHL players, just not up to the contracts that they were signed to. So I could see a lot of the older guys going to some contender. And I could see some, rebuilding teams maybe taking a chance on a guy like Boqvist. Still pretty young, still could have some upside, just didn't work out in Columbus.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of buyouts there. There's a couple contracts there with a few years left, but most of them only have 1 year left on the deal. The only head scratcher to me is Jeff Skinner, who I believe had 3 years left at $9 million. I just don't think the cap penalty for the Sabres is worth enough to get him off the roster. Yes, he's making $9 million, but he is still a $5 to $6 million player. So to me, that's a little bit of a head scratcher, but excited to see where Jeff Skinner ends up.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask you what you thought about Jeff Skinner particularly. But like you said, I mean, it's not a terrible contract, maybe 1 or 2 million over what he is worth. But they have a lot of young guys on their ELC, so it's not like they had, they needed to make some money for some other guys to come in. A lot of those guys had a down year last year in Buffalo, so you can't really blame a guy like Jeff Skinner. I'd be really excited to see who he's with because I think he could fetch a lot of money in free agency.
So just moving on, there have also been a lot of trades at the draft and post-draft. Some of the biggest ones coming from Kenny's Tampa Bay Lightning, so I will let him take it away. Kenny, what do you think of the moves Tampa has made so far?
Yeah, starting with the Jeannot one, obviously it is painful being, just 1 year removed from giving up 5 draft picks for him. But honestly, I think they got more than he's worth. When I watch games, I don't look at him and say he's a second round kind of player. So the fact they got a second round pick on top of another one, I think it's pretty good work, just clearing some cap for a guy who just was not working out in Tampa. So we'll see how he does in LA. Jake Gensel just this morning got acquired. He's just his signing rights for a 3rd round pick. 3rd round pick's a little steep for signing rates. You usually see it's like a 5th or 6th round pick. I do understand Gensel's a good player, but that 3rd round pick, it's a little steep for me. And the biggest one, Mikhail Sergachev going to Utah. Utah is loading up. They are rebuilding their D-core, looking pretty strong. Like I said on our Instagram post, I think Tampa exhausted all options, trying to get guys like Chernak or other bigger contracts to move. And then when they had no other option, they had to get rid of Sergachev. It is a huge cap hit, but he's a good player. Had a down year this past year, especially with that injury. And they do get some pretty decent pieces back. I think JJ Moser can be a solid top 6 guy, maybe even come into the top 4. And then Connor Geeky could be a very good piece for them going forward, although just a little bit out of their window.
Yeah, I love what Tampa did overall, especially with acquiring the signing rights to Gensel, assuming they can sign him. They are getting a little bit younger while still being able to compete around guys like Nikita Kucherov, Andrei Vasilevsky, Victor Hedman, right? So bringing in Gensel to the fold, that's huge. And I love the acquisition of JJ Moser. I think he can make an impact on this Tampa Bay team.
Moving on, we'll go with New Jersey. They got a couple trades in. Caden, we talked about the Alex Holtz trade yesterday. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of a head scratcher. It doesn't really make too much sense to me. You look back at when they acquired Timo Meyer at the deadline, and they weren't willing to give up Holtz in that trade. But then you turn around in the offseason and you trade him for pennies on the dollar to the Golden Knights. You acquire Paul Cotter, who, fourth liner, third liner, not really, doesn't have the ceiling that Holtz does. He hasn't developed the way that the Devils maybe have wanted him to, but I think giving up on him this early is something that they may regret in the future.
Yeah, I think it's just poor prospect management from the New Jersey Devils. The whole time Holtz has been there, just been shelled in third, fourth line roles, just not getting much minutes. And on top of that, you're throwing in a guy like Akira Schmid. He's not the greatest goaltender prospect, but he is still pretty decent and has a little bit of upside. Obviously, had that really good round against the Rangers a couple of years ago. And I think they're selling a little low on both of these prospects, and they're just not bringing much value back to a team who should be contending. On top of that, New Jersey sheds John Marino for a couple of picks. I know Vancouver was on him, but they did move him to Utah. So again, they are rebuilding that defensive core there in the new hockey club. And they make room for a guy like Simon Nemec, even though they are reported to get a guy like Brett Pesce. So not really sure what's going to happen with Nemec there, but they're going to have a pretty solid decor in New Jersey.
And we just talked about Holtz and it being poor prospect development. And, the last thing we want to see as hockey fans is the same thing that happened to Simon Nemec. Because if you sign Pesci, you're not really giving him any opportunity to grow or get minutes on that right side if Dougie Hamilton, presuming he's healthy for this upcoming season. So, you wonder what New Jersey's doing if they do sign Pesci. Maybe they do really want to compete, and adding a shutdown defender in Pesci into that top four really helps. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, Nemec can get some minutes and develop into the defenseman we all know he can be.
Another trade yesterday, and one that I really like for Washington is bringing in a guy like Logan Thompson. Kind of poor timing. I believe he was at a autograph signing during the trade, but good on him. He said he stayed there and he finished the signing, and then I guess moved over and went to Washington. But I don't think Vegas really got much value back for him. I understand they had a very good 1A, 1B situation, and at least one of the goalies was expendable, and they decided to go with Hale as their starter. But like I said, I think Logan Thompson could have brought back a little bit more than I believe it was just two third-round picks.
Read a story, Kenny, about how Logan Thompson was at the signing and he signed a Logan Thompson Golden Knights jersey. And he said to the fan, I guess you got to get a new one now. But he gets to go to Washington, teams up with Charlie Lindgren and Kenny. They're the only left-handed tandem in the league. They both play left-handed, so thought that was kind of funny considering how uncommon it is. But yeah, looking at Washington, they're having one hell of an offseason, starting off with that PLD trade we talked about last episode, this Logan Thompson trade, and they also brought in Andrew Mangiapane for just a second round pick from the Calgary Flames. Kenny, what do you think of this move?
Although they did make the playoffs this past season, it was a pretty embarrassing outing for them. So they have bolstered up their lineup, and I assume they're going to go out and sign a couple more players to really round out this core. And I really like all the moves that they made. It didn't really give up much of the future. And they're kind of staying consistent, kind of staying competitive with the final years of Alex Ovechkin. I really like the Logan Thompson deal. I mean, he's coming in at under 800K. Like, that's an insane trade, especially when you're considering they moved on from Darcy Kemper, who was above 5 million. I assume Thompson's going to get a raise by next season, so maybe they're going to do an extension there. But I like all the moves that they've done. Hopefully, they can go out and get a defenseman. They have really addressed the goaltending and the forwards, so hopefully a defenseman will come in free agency.
Absolutely love these moves, and you talk about doing it for the last few years of Ovechkin. I love how they're staying aggressive, putting all their chips in the middle. They're ready to win for him, and they're doing it. So hopefully they can stay aggressive come July 1st.
On the flip side, Ovechkin's rival, Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins bring in Kevin Hayes and his $7 million contract. Although 50% is retained by Philly, it's $3.5 million for a guy who had under 30 points this past season. It's another aging vet. What do you think of the deal?
I think it's pretty funny because obviously this didn't work last year, bringing in all these aging veterans to kind of help Crosby, and I don't know what they think is going to change this season. I like Kevin Hayes as a player, especially for $3 million. I don't think that's too bad. I know only had less than 30 points last season, but I believe he can bounce back. He can play down the middle. He can play the wing. I think it's a good acquisition for Pittsburgh, considering he's 50% retained. So I don't hate it. But like you said in the Instagram post, Pittsburgh is collecting the aging vets like Infinity Stones. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits in with Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, they do get a sweetener out of it with the second round pick, which they can move on and try to bring in a rental at the deadline if they are competitive. But it's kind of interesting. A lot of fans were not excited that Jeff Carter was retiring, but just happy that that contract was over. And then they kind of just bring back that contract in Kevin Hayes. I think he has more production than Jeff Carter, but still interesting. They are a very old team. I think one of the oldest in the league, and that trade certainly doesn't help that stat.
All right, so just moving on to the draft. Kenny was a crazy draft. The draft really started at the number 3 pick. But that being said, who were your biggest surprises?
But I think the biggest surprise for me overall was just the fact that so many forwards went so early. We both thought that defensemen, like there were a lot of elite defensemen out there, so we thought that the top five, top seven was just going to be filled with defensemen, and that was just not the case. So that means that a lot of defensemen got picked, after 10 or just around 10 that became, they're looking like pretty good picks. But for me, surprises, I think obviously it starts at Seneca. I mean, how can you not say it's a surprise when the player reacts like that? I remember when Kakanyemi went back to Montreal in 2018, and I mean the fans were surprised, but he was fine as a player. I remember Mo Sider in 2019. He wasn't, saying all that when he was picked, even though the fans were surprised. But here with Seneca, both the fans and the player himself just utterly shocked. I think with the Senators, I think Yakimchuk, although he's a good defenseman, I just think there were better ones available. We talked about Perek being there, Bouillon, even a guy like Dickinson. I think I would have rather have seen that one of those players go to Ottawa. And then Seattle, although Catton is a really good pick, I really like that. I'm surprised they didn't go with a defenseman. Like we said in our mock draft, we thought that Seattle would look for, their cornerstone franchise defenseman, and that just wasn't the case this year.
Berkeley Catton jumping into the top 10. I think that was also a big surprise for me. Some after the top 10, I think Zeev Buium falling all the way to 12 was a huge shock to me. There were talks about Anaheim even taking him at 3. There were rumblings about that. But I thought for sure he was going to be picked in the top 10. So dropping down to 12 is a pretty big surprise. And then even Cole Eiserman at 20. I think falling to the Islanders, I think it's a great pick from the Islanders. Easily the best shot in the draft and has the potential to be one of the best players in this draft if he can, round out the rest of his game. And then going in a little bit later in the 4th round, Aaron Kiwi-Haru to the Minnesota Wild was a consensus top pick just a few years ago for this class, and lack of development and his size. I believe he only stands in at 5'10" for the defenseman. Just kind of tanked his draft stock. He was still expected to go anywhere between 20 and 60, so dropping all the way into like the 120s is pretty absurd. Minnesota got a crazy steal there. But yeah, this draft really started at 3 with Seneca. Was a bit of a shock, but they were talking to him throughout the whole year. So this was obviously their guy. I respect for sticking to it. But yeah, crazy draft overall. Haven't seen one like this in a while. I love the drafts where you kind of just don't know what's going to happen and teams can kind of take anybody and it goes every single way.
Touched on Eiserman, and I mean it's a 20th overall pick. There's really no risk there to take him. If he pans out, then it's a steal. If he doesn't, it was 20th overall. Another guy, Silayev, going 10. I think he should have gone a lot earlier. Same with Demidov going 5. Although it is early, a top 5 pick, that's nothing to complain about. I think he was. You mentioned it. He's the second best player in this class. I thought for sure he was going to go at 3, at least 4. But the fact that Montreal picked him up at 5, like I said, although it's a top 5 pick, that could look to be a very big steal. And I think Montreal, with another pick, picking up Page, I think it was around the early 20s they picked him up. I think that's a very solid deal. I think that guy's got a lot of heart. And I think Montreal could be looked at as one of the winners of this draft.
But yeah, on to the steals. I think mine are very similar to yours. I think Ivan Demidov, I think he should have gone 2 personally, but the Blackhawks were so locked in on Lev Shunov. They needed that D-man. Gotta respect it. I just think going 2, positional value at 2, I think is pretty crazy. I think when you're that high in the draft, you have to go best player available. But yeah, Siliev at 10 as well. I think a huge steal. I had him at 3, so him falling into New Jersey's lap at 10, I think they're gonna be super happy with him. Hopefully they can develop him. And then just a winner. I think the Calgary Flames had a really good draft Being able to pick up Zane Perek at 9, I think that's something they didn't even think could happen. Him falling into their lap as well, really awesome. Picking up Henry Muse in the third round as well, I think was a really good steal. He was a consensus second round pick, so getting him in the third, I think, is a massive win. And Calgary, I think, drafted 10 players this draft, so a lot of young players coming into the fold looking to make an impact in that organization.
Moving on with the content, we have free agency starting tomorrow on July 1st, and there are some huge names out on the market. Obviously, deals could be done by today, by even, I think, tomorrow morning. I don't think free agency starts until around midday. So stuff could change between then, but we're just going to list out some of the top guys and some of the term and contracts that we think they could sign to. Starting off with one of the biggest names, my favorite player, Steven Stamkos, still has the potential to re-sign, but it sounds like talks have pretty much broken off between the two parties, and he looks like he could walk. A little disrespectful, I think, the contract that they offered him. It was a retirement contract, but $3 million per type of player that he is just kind of absurd. I could see him walking up to get a sort of like a Joe Pavelski deal. I think when he first left San Jose, it was a 3x7. So I could see a team trying to pay that. Some people are saying Montreal, Detroit, Nashville. Personally, I would like Detroit. I think they are the closest out of those three to win. Nashville, although I do like the city, I just don't think they have it in them, and I don't think Stamkos is the final piece to their cup winning team. But yeah, Steven Stamkos, I think he could fetch north of 6 for sure, and then perhaps even 7.
Yeah, it's funny that you comp the potential Stamkos contract to Joe Pavelski, the 3x7. I was going to comp it to Claude Giroux, about 3 years, 6.5 million. Depending on where he goes, he could even fetch more if a bidding war breaks out. But yeah, I love the fit in Detroit. I would also like to see, maybe Toronto, his hometown team, but he would have to take a discount. There's some cap restraints there. Even the Canucks now, maybe, with Gensel being out of the fold to Tampa, maybe they take a run. Stamkos can play on Pedersen's wing. I think he would be a really good fit there. But yeah, very unlikely. I think the more likely option, like you said, Detroit or even Nashville.
Moving on, Jake Gensel is one of the biggest names as well, although his rights are with Tampa Bay, and I'm sure they're trying to figure out a deal right now. I mean, you're looking at a max term. If he hits free agency, it'll be 7 years. If it's with Tampa, I believe it can get 8. But you're looking at, I want to say under 9, but I could very likely see 9, even 9.5. If it's in Tampa with the tax, I could see them getting lower than 9, and just getting, team friendly deal, just like every other contract that they sign.
Yeah, if Tampa manages to sign him to the max term, 8 years, I think, Gensel's happy to sign for 8 million. It's exactly what he wants, the 8x8. And you mentioned that no state tax. I think he'd be more than happy to be signing for $64 million in Tampa Bay. So over under 82 points, Jake Gensel, if he signs with Tampa.
Over. Over.
Really, like easily.
I believe
How
so.
many goals do you think he scores? He's hit 40
45.
before. 45? Okay, yeah, okay.
45. Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see. Hopefully he signs.
Moving on, Elias Lindholm rejected, I think, a 7x7 from Vancouver. So maybe he's expecting to get more in the open market. I can't see it getting that high, though. Um, Favorites, got to think the Boston Bruins are all over him. They were looking at Dubois before he got moved, and they need that number one center. So I could see them locking him up, but I thought 7 was too much. So anything over that would just be too much for a guy like him.
I mean, yeah, you saw him with Vancouver playing third line minutes, and his regular season wasn't great. So it depends how teams view that playoff run he had and how much his stock was rising. It also depends on interests. If there's multiple teams interested, a bidding war could break out. But yeah, I could see Boston, giving him the 7 years for like 8 plus, below 9 for sure. But I think they'd overpay to like eight, between 8, 8.5 AAV.
Last one, Jonathan Marchessault leaving Vegas. At least that's what it looks like right now. Original misfit. What do you think he gets on the open market?
Tough to say. Him and Stevenson both kind of priced themselves out of Vegas on the open market for Marchessault. Depending on the term, I think he can get somewhere between $6 and $7 million. I don't know, ballpark it around there, maybe 6.5 from a team. But it'll be interesting to see, these rebuilding teams with cap space, like Chicago, like San Jose, how aggressive they are in free agency for guys like this. We've seen it in the past. Who knows where Marchessault wants to sign, who he wants to go with, but we'll see tomorrow come July 1st.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'll take your comparison with like a Claude Giroux kind of contract, 6.5, and I could see him go home, maybe Montreal. maybe be part of that new Canadians team and sort of bring that experience that he has. He has a Cup winner, Conn Smythe winner. So we'll go over to the defense. Chris Tanev acquired by Toronto. Do you think he signs, and how much?
Personally, I hope he doesn't sign and walks into free agency, walks right to Vancouver. In an ideal world, I think that would be good. But that being said, I think if Toronto manages to lock him up, I could see the AAV. I think he kind of takes, Chris Tanev, good guy, defensive defenseman, blocks a lot of shots. I don't think he's going to command a lot of money. I think he would take somewhere between $3-4 million depending on the term. I think it's a fair deal. He's very solid shutdown defender. But yeah, Toronto making a great move, picking him up for cheap to acquire those signing rates.
Yeah, if they can sign him, they'll get a very good defensive defenseman. On the team's view, I would err on the side of like a 1 year deal, not too much term with him. I was watching a YouTube video earlier today, and just the way that he plays, you got to think that his body's gonna start cutting down a little bit soon. So I can't imagine giving him a 3 year, 4 year deal. It's got to be a quick one, 1 to 2 years. But I like the AAB. You said $3 or $4 million. Moving on, next defenseman on the list, probably the one that'll fetch the most money, in my opinion. Brady Shea, looking like he's going to walk from the Carolina Hurricanes. They have so many defensemen and so many contracts of their own that they got to figure out. And Brady Shea looks like he priced himself out. I could see him getting, you know, possibly max term $7 million on the open market. I think a team is going to look at his play last year and really want to bring them in to help them contend. I think he's going to go to a winner. At this point in his career, I can't imagine he goes to a rebuilding team, although those are the ones with the most money. Not really sure what team to name here, but I would assume a contending team would pick him up.
I think he's going to command a lot of money, like you said, and this could be, one of those deals we look back on and it's like, holy, that is a massive overpay. He's a really solid defender, but for the money he can get, I think it's just going to get to a point where it's a little bit ridiculous. Depending, like you said, if a contending team picks him up, he's not going to be a number one defenseman, maybe not even a number two. He'll be in the top four, and paying that much money for a guy like that is kind of ludicrous. But yeah, no team I can really think of, but I do agree with you. I don't think he's going to be going to a rebuilding team.
And then another Carolina defenseman walking and reported to go to the New Jersey Devils. I'm not sure if any details were released on the term or anything, but Brett Pesce looking like he's going to solidify that top four in New Jersey, and it's looking pretty strong with Hamilton himself, Luke Hughes, and I think it's Siegenthaler on that left side. But like we said, a little confusing. I thought Nemec would really get that chance to step up. I guess he'll have to settle for top six, but Pesce, I would say 6 years, $6-7 million.
Yeah, totally agree. Was going to throw out a 6x6 right there. Just seems like it. Really solid year with Carolina. Very serviceable defenseman. I think he could easily get 6x6 on the open market.
Both those defensemen walking, as well as Jake Gensel. Is Carolina's window over? Are they still contending? What do you think?
I think it really comes down to free agency and what they decide to do here. They do have a lot of contracts up in the air. Even Martin Necas, if they do trade Martin Necas, I think their cup contending window definitely gets smaller and their cup chances totally decrease. But I still think they're a very solid playoff team just with that forward core up front, and the decor is still very serviceable. That being said, it'll be interesting to see if they still ride with Freddie Anderson and if he can bounce back after his injury last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy that two of those guys can leave your decor and you still got like Jacob Slavin, Brent Burns, Dmitry Orlov, Jalen Chatfield. Like, it's still such a solid decor, even though two of your top four guys walk out. Going over to a Stanley Cup champion and a former Canuck, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I think it was $3 million last year on a 1 year deal with Florida. Not sure if there's any reports that he's staying, but do you think he walks, and then how much?
Yeah, we were talking about this the other week. It's tough to say with OEL. He was playing third pairing minutes, but he was on PP1. I think he's super happy in Florida, honestly. I don't think he would take too much of a pay raise. I think he'd stay. I think he'd take 2-3 years, $3 million, kind of similar to what Tyler Myers just signed. I don't think he would command too much money personally. That's just my opinion. I know it's a different opinion on the other side. But yeah, I would see him staying in Florida, trying to run it back and go back to back.
Yeah, I mean, if you won the cup, why not stay? And like we keep mentioning, that tax in Florida is a real helper when it comes to contracts. Might not help here with Brandon Montour. Haven't seen anything that he's going to return, and he could get a lot of money on the open market. I don't think it was this I think it was the year before this one that he had that monster year, really carrying them when Ekblad was out injured. And I think he could get 6 to 7 years, $6 to $7 million. He is that good, and I'm for sure that a team will pay that money.
Yeah, we'll be interesting to see where he goes. I'm not too sure about the cap, what the cap's looking like for a team like Colorado, but they are Sean Walker's looking like he's gonna walk. So if they can't sign him, maybe they eye up a guy like Montour. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see the term. A team, contending with a little bit tighter cap could give him less term, more money, or we could see a team, give him that 7 years for the 6 7 million that we think he's worth.
Do you think a guy like him would see, winning a cup, being like, okay, I've won one. Now I can go to like Chicago, make a ton of money, and be part of their, up and coming team.
Yeah, with Montour, I could definitely see it because this will be his first big payday and maybe his only one, considering how he's played. And there is some appeal in Chicago, the draft they just had, and obviously Connor Bedard is the main piece there. So I could definitely see Montour, looking at San Jose, looking at Chicago and being like, I want to play with some young guys, just give me some money and I'll do it. And, getting to sign that money, getting that security and kind of just, almost riding off into the sunset for his career.
Well, yeah, I've always wondered whether you get just hungry for another one right away, or you kind of just like, okay, got one. Let me secure my, financials right now. But we'll go with the last one here. Former Canuck decided to walk. I just think the cap was going to be too high that he was asking for. Nikita Zadorov, big guy, big frame, going to command a lot of money. I could see 5 years, $6 7 million for him. I would assume a contender. I mean, he's built for playoff hockey, so I would assume that he wants to go and win a cup.
Yeah, totally built for the playoff hockey. We saw it this past season. He was unreal for the Canucks in the playoffs. But yeah, he declined a $5 million AAV from the Canucks. I'm not too sure about the term. Maybe the term was too short. I think the money wasn't enough, but he was willing to take a pay cut, but still denying 5 million for a third pairing defenseman is kind of crazy to me. So this has overpay written all over it. I think he'll get a Myers deal in free agency, so a 6x6. I think a team will be willing to pay that, considering how he just played in the playoffs as well. Before the moves Toronto made today, like re-signing Domi, I don't know if they have the cap for him. They were taking a look at him prior to July 1st. But yeah, he's kind of just an open book. We'll see where his priorities are and, where he ends up. But yeah, I think 6x6 at the very least is what he can get.
But that wraps up our free agency overlook and predictions. Let us know what you guys think. Let us know where you want these guys to sign. There are a lot of big names, and it could be a potentially wild free agency after, like you said, a wild draft. This is shaping up to be one of the best off seasons we've had in a long time.
That's going to be all from us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Looking forward to an awesome free agency coming up tomorrow, July 1st. A lot of players moving, maybe some more trades shaken out. But yeah, very exciting day for hockey tomorrow.
Yeah, posting a lot more news on Instagram, so make sure you go check that out. Probably won't have another episode until probably next week. Let all the free agency stuff sort of die down before we sort of dive into all of it. And we'll try to keep the news as updated as possible, just mostly the big stuff. But yeah, a lot of exciting stuff this off season, so stay tuned.
It will be sweet. It's a whole nother level of sour. 100 bad men a week. 100 bad